Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time you find yourself viewing this. I hope that this video is helpful as it gives you a little background into the narrative essay. And I hope if you are watching it because you missed class for some reason, that you're back in class next session. We're going to take a look at the narrative essay. We finished a summary response essay, and the narrative essay is an essay that allows people to do what Green suggests and stop being an impartial observer and start taking their place in the story, in the events, and starts talking about this idea of this thing had a purpose and this experience was important because it had a certain purpose. So as we do the narrative essay, we're going to do step by steps through the assignment. We're also going to talk about the format and what things need to happen in the narrative essay. Step one, I think, for a narrative essay is make it a story. And I taught literature for a lot of years. One of the things with literature is that there has to be a conflict. There has to be perhaps an internal conflict, perhaps it's an external conflict, perhaps it's a conflict that combines the two. You might have a conflict where you drove out in the middle of a blizzard and you got caught, and now you're dealing with why was I so stupid? At the same time, you're trying to figure out ways to stay warm and survive the blizzard. All of those are possible, but you have to tell the story and you have to have a conflict. A narrative essay is going to talk about a personal experience. That personal experience may matter to you, but in order for it to matter for a reader, there has to be some element of suspense. You're standing here in front of me telling me that this is the story that happened, so I know you survived the event. The suspense has to come someplace along the line with there were things that were in doubt, and somehow way I got past that doubt and created something new and better or experienced something new and better. There has to be conflict. There has to be conflict in a novel, there has to be conflict in a movie. The conflict doesn't have to be external, it's not a fist fight. The conflict can be internal. But if you're going to have this narrative, make it a story. Vary the pace. All right. I miss Bob Ross. I really, really do. But he seldom varied the pace. There were just wonderful, cute little trees all over the place. I think it's important to understand that as you're telling the story, you maybe have to speed up a little bit and emphasize elements of the narration. You have to cut things from the narration because all details are not equally important. I'll probably stress this point a lot. You will have to get rid of details. And the most important elements should be the ones that you fully develop and that you have fully realized scenes for. So think about varying the pace, think about the details that are important, think about speeding up and not emphasizing the unimportant elements, and only focus deeply about the important ones. Again, more is not better. That's true, especially for words. And I think the idea is to work to select only the best words. I'm going to fall back in the cliche show, don't tell. Showing the person laughing is far better than having the word laugh on the page. Do things to the key drama, the key conflict in the experience. Spend time showing that. Spend time describing that. And again, only those details that support the purpose of the essay as a whole, that support the purpose that you're trying to have. And the purpose, you're going to hear me say this later, has to go beyond, oh, wow, this happened to me, so it must be important. When I was a kid, my father used to tell me, just because it happened to you doesn't make it interesting. Make sure that this narrative has a purpose, has a larger purpose. And we'll talk about that when we talk about Green's essays and what they do to have the larger purpose. Be consistent. If you look at the drawing on the screen, you will see, depending on your point of view, a young woman who is looking away from you, or you will see an older woman who is just kind of looking straight forward. And it all depends whether you view the back part as a fancy hat or as a kerchief. And it all depends whether you view the things as an ear or an eye, and whether you view things as the line of a cheek or you view things as the beginning of the nose. This is either an old woman or a young woman, depending on how you look at it. You don't have that option. Your point of view needs to be consistent. Your point of view attitudinally needs to be consistent. Your point of view as a writer needs to be consistent. If you start first person, stay first person. If you start kind of as an omniscient narrator with you as a character, stay that way. And please, I'm begging you, I was going to say for the love of God, and I will say it, for the love of God, don't use second person. The word you should not appear in this essay. Plain and simple, the word you should not appear in this essay. You should talk about your experience, either in the first person or third person, but never the second person. Be consistent with point of view. And be consistent with your attitude. All right? I love despair.com. Consistency is a virtue only if you're not a screw up. But be consistent in your attitude. Yes, perhaps this marked a change in your life, but set up this idea that it was a positive experience from the beginning. Even if bad things happened, even though there's conflict, explain that positive attitude from the beginning. If this was a negative experience and you would never want to relive it again, then even if there's funny elements in it, make sure that you explain in detail the idea of, or show consistently the fact that this was a terrible experience and that even the humor that you can laugh at it now years later still has a tinge of this sucks. And I'm laughing to relieve the tension more than I'm laughing because it was funny. Be consistent with your attitude towards the event, towards the people. Make clear that you learned, make clear that you grew, make clear that you changed, but have a consistent attitude. Be consistent with the chronology. If you look at the two pictures, in chronological order, the helicopters cannot come before the Revolutionary War painting. And if you think you want to do a flashback and provide some drama, or you think you want to do a flash forward, reserve those only for the most important events. Reserve those only for the most important events. Again, be consistent with the chronology. The easiest way to do this is first, second, third. Take the events straight through in chronological order. If you have to describe things, I think that the descriptive element, you can go top to bottom, left to right. You can run through the senses in whatever form you want to. But chronologically, I really believe it's important beginning, middle, and end. Be consistent. Flashbacks are tough to write, and this one might be a risk not worth taking. But if you put it in, only, only the most important events. Have a point. I cannot stress this enough. What do you want the essay to achieve? Greene has tons of details. His essay on wonder spends a whole bunch of time on the Great Gatsby and the history of the Great Gatsby. The point of that is that perhaps there should be a sense of wonder about why Gatsby as a novel survives and why we spend a lot of time with it, but also that Gatsby's view of the sense of wonder doesn't match his. But I had this experience, according to Greene, where I developed this sense of wonder, and it was amazing. Telling someone this happened to me is seldom the actual point. Most of the time, in my humble opinion, when people are talking about this happened to me, they want their audience to validate the experience. And by validating the experience, the audience is validating them as a human being. The narrative, in a lot of ways, is an argument. It's an argument that my life is worth validation. Have a point beyond this happened to me, and I think have a point beyond validate me. Think about, did you learn something? Did you experience something? Did you grow in a certain way? And as you think about those things, tell the story that explains the growth and why that growth was important. I think that that's far better than just, hey, look at me. Second, any narration or description should have some kind of larger problem to be talked about. Perhaps it's some current argument or controversy that the country or the world is facing. Perhaps it's trying to explain in detail why that problem has affected you and why that conflict is important to you. Perhaps you're making comparisons to other events or things like that, but have a point that's beyond first world problems. All right? Have a point that goes beyond first world problems. Have a point that does something with the narration, with the description. Greene certainly takes a little bit of time to get to the point sometimes, but at the end, he always has a point. That model, I think, is important here. I think I've mentioned this several times. In your narrative essay, the point probably needs to be some insight that was gained, something that you learned as you were going through. Again, I'll go back to the sense of wonder article. He gained some insight that perhaps looking at the world like he's a young child and having that sense of wonder like a young child may have benefits at times. Even if it is something common and something ordinary, there's a beauty and there is a uniqueness to that ordinary. It's a point worth looking at. And so I think, what was the insight gained? All of the conflict, all of the struggle led to something. What was that thing? And there's a caveat that I have to add here. Most of us are not going to be struck by lightning on the road, by blinding light, not lightning, by blinding light on the road to Damascus and find out that everything we have believed up until now has been wrong and has been terrible, and we should turn around and change our ways. Most of us aren't going to have that kind of epiphany, certainly one that's that extreme. A lot of us may have little epiphanies. There is wonder in ordinary things, is a little epiphany that I believe has a big impact. The idea that one should simplify. Rob Greenfield's epiphany, I think, was a step by step, slowly but surely, And if you haven't watched that video yet, all of you, I think, will get a chance as part of the daily writings to watch that video. Step by step sort of um, experience. I think as people go through and look at the other essays, I spent a lot of time on the sense of wonder. We will kind of go through some of the other essays and talk about the conflict and talk about other elements that Green does to show the narrative has a point and to usually show that he gains some sort of insight with the narrative illustrating that. That seems to me, I think, to be the key. It doesn't have to be the road to Damascus experience. It can be something really small, like a leaf. That about wraps this one up. I hope that this was helpful. If you have questions, please ask them in class. If you're watching this to kind of get a little bit of extra background, and I hope this helped a little bit, and I hope to see you all in the next class period. Have a good one.